So hello achievers, today I'm glad because I am with an amazing guy. You will love this interview, so follow this interview. You can see his book in French, Être Coach. So from coach to awakener, and he is Robert Dilts. He is with me to answer my question. So hello Robert.
Hello David.
How are you today?
I'm great.
You are in Paris.
Yes.
You are
it's
my
spring.
Yes, you are my first English interview in Paris.
In Paris?
Yes.
Wow, okay. Well, it's good, always good to be the first.
Yes. So you are a trainer, author, and one of the founder of the NLP. According to you, what is NLP and how we can use it?
Well, NLP is basically it's a model and a set of skills that we can use to achieve success in many different areas.
Yes.
The basic idea of NLP, the N of NLP, is about the nervous system, and it says the basic idea is our nervous system is a filter on the world, and that depending upon how we use that filter, either we're able to perceive a lot of possibilities, a lot of choices, or in other states, we don't see very much at all. And a lot of my work is about how we can bring ourselves, our body, our nervous system into what I would call a generative state. You know, the ability to be creative, to be innovative, to create the life that we want together with others.
Great.
So, and NLP is about finding how people who are successful achieve their successes using language. That's the L of NLP, so neuro-linguistic programming. The programming means how do we put our nervous system and our language into, let's say the sequences, the states to be able to achieve what we want to in our lives.
Yeah, it is a topic that I love because I meet a lot of people.
Yeah.
And what is the best strategies to model someone quickly?
Yeah. Well, there are two ways of modeling. Two basic ways of modeling. One is a more conscious approach where you're asking questions that we sometimes refer to it as analytical modeling, meaning.
What kind of questions?
There's usually we say the basic questions form a kind of a feedback loop. You have goals. So what are your goals? 2, what is your feedback if you're reaching those goals? 3, what do you do in order to get to them? And 4, what happens when you run into problems? So these are the basic questions. And then you would look at how people use their, we would say in NLP, their sensory representational systems. That is their eyes, but also their ability to visualize, ears, their inner voice, body and feelings. So what are the things that people do to achieve, like we say, how do you represent the goal? Do you visualize it? Do you use words? We find, for example, that people who are most successful at something don't just have a word, right? They don't just say, oh, I want to succeed. You have a picture, and you have not only a literal picture, like an image of yourself, but often people have a more symbolic image. And then, most importantly, it's not just something that is in the head. People will have what we call a somatic model, a somatic representation of what they want, so that you feel it, and it's like this goal is alive inside of you. And I find this with all of the successful entrepreneurs that I have talked to and that I've met, that the goal is not something out there. Oh, maybe someday I'll get it. It's inside. You dream it. It's in the body. You dream it. You live it. You sleep it, and so it activates what we would call the creative unconscious. Because part of the problem is that our conscious cognitive mind is pretty limited. And what I'll find, for example, in my study of the strategies of genius.
Yes,
like
one of my questions.
Mozart, Da Vinci, Einstein, etc. You look at these famous geniuses, and they all will say, hey, it's not my cognitive mind, and it's not analytical, just either mathematic or cognitive understanding. There's a whole world of this this creative unconscious. So speaking of that, the second way of modeling quickly is what we would say in NLP. I kind of put myself in the shoes of the other person. We say second position. First position is my own point of view. Second position is sort of taking on somebody else. Third position is kind of looking at it more distantly, like an observer. So if you make this combination, the fastest way to model is the combination of the more analytical, but then the more unconscious way of sort of absorbing what we can feel from somebody. It's not just magic. They've discovered in the last 15 years what they call mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are parts of the brain that if we're looking at each other, they call them mirror neurons because literally part of our brain is mirroring what we see the other person doing. And so it's why, for example, if you see children, they can watch somebody do something and immediately do it because these mirror neurons are activated. And they say 15 to 30% of some parts of our brain are mirror neurons, which means that we can kind of absorb without thinking about it, right? They're not a conscious part of our nervous system, but we can absorb what people do. So again, I think if we use this combination of, the second position and then asking a few very specific key questions, then you can model quickly. The other thing that in my work, and it's what this ETRA coach is about, is we also would say that there are different levels of programming. So one level is about our relation with the environment, right? We have our eyes, our ears.
You answer all my questions.
Yeah,
perfect.
So there's this part, but in order to do something, right, to change that environment or to respond to the environment, I do it with my body, right, with my behavior. So we have environment and then behavior. But how does my body know what to do? It's because I have, my brain and other parts of the nervous system which develop certain capabilities, right? So to learn a language is not just saying the word, it's also understanding, have a kind of a mental map or a cognitive map of something. Then, so this would be the third level, we would say that the environment level is about where and when, right? Concrete. Behavior is about what do I do, physical. The capability level is how do I know, right? I need to use judgment. I need to understand. That's more in let's say our not only our cognitive strategy, but also in a certain level of emotional intelligence. But above that, the fourth level is what we would call beliefs and values. So belief is something different than just an understanding, because you can understand something and not believe it. Believing it is something that goes more deep into the nervous system. We say it's about why, not how or what or where or when, but why do I do something? So belief has to do with our motivations and also our sense of permission. And what I would say is that most of the successful people in the world don't just have better capabilities, right? There's a lot of smart people. There's a lot of people who are good at learning something. They know a lot, but they're not successful because they don't believe in themselves. They don't believe in what they're doing. And so belief is probably that one of the key success factors in people who do something well.
Yeah.
Then above that, above the why, there's the who, right? How do I see myself and who do I see myself as in the world? And I usually say this has to do with two things: my role in the world, or who am I,
my mission,
and then my mission. Because my role is kind of, well, who am I in terms of, like, okay, I'm a trainer or I'm a father.
Okay, my work.
Yeah. But my mission is what I am uniquely bringing into the world. So, for example, I think you are who you are because you are pursuing a mission that is very unique, right? I don't think anybody else can do exactly what you do because you're using all of your, your beliefs, your capabilities, your behaviors to bring something into the environment and bring it to other people. And this also then has to do with the final level, even above identity, because in NLP we would say that people are what Arthur Kessler and Ken Wilber call a whole-on. A whole-on means I am a whole person. I am made up of other wholes, right? I have a whole eyes and a whole heart. I'm made up of other wholes, but I am also part of a bigger whole.
Yeah.
So I am part of a family. I'm part of a profession. I'm part of a community. I'm part of a a planet, the world. And what you find is the more successful people, and certainly the geniuses, have an ongoing sense of yes, I am me, but I am part of something bigger, greater, and I serve something greater through me. And that's what we would say is the vision and purpose.
Yes. So you found that a lot of successful people have this kind of vision.
Yes, exactly.
Do you think everyone can find this kind of vision?
I do think everybody can. I think, it's challenging. This is the interesting thing now about programming. That, people think, oh, neurolinguistic programming, it means that you are your programming. And I would say, no, we are more than our programming, right? I'm not my programming.
Yeah, I'm not my behavior.
Yeah. When we come into this world, we have an identity, right? This idea of that level of identity that is not yet shaped by programs. It's an incredible, let's say, quantum, of potential. And that potential becomes expressed in the world through programs. But we are more than that programming. And I think when we talk about this idea, does everybody have the possibility to have a vision? If you look at any baby, any young being, they are not limited by programming yet. You spend a day with a 2-year-old and they are full of energy. The world is full of possibilities. They're learning. Then what happens is you start to get programmed by your parents, by your school, by your society, by your environment. And I read a very interesting study, just I think an interesting example of this, by people that observe. They have a whole way of looking at behavior where they have a kind of a whole calculus of mathematics of behavior. So, for example, they say if you watch, a baby that's a few months old for 1 hour, that baby in 1 hour will make 1,000 different movements, right, with his body. If you take the same child when they're 10 years old and you watch them for an hour, you won't see 1,000 movements anymore. You'll see a few hundred movements.
Wow.
If you take the same person and they're 30 years old and you watch them for an hour, you're going to be lucky to see 100 movements. So what's happening? Well, on the one hand, you can say, well, we become more efficient. We don't use as much, we don't use as many different behaviors. But I think the other unfortunate part of it is that we also become, more rigid, limited. And I think what happens in our behavior also happens with our creativity, with our vision. Right? When you're a child, everything is possible. Then you begin to get programmed, and some intentionally, teachers tell you, sit still, listen, you should be seen and not heard, don't express yourself. But also, just through our life, we are wounded emotionally in various ways. It's impossible to avoid it. And in fact, every successful person has also been wounded. But one of the interesting things I find, and I don't mean just physically wounded, but emotionally, psychologically, but they're able to transform those wounds into the basis of a kind of mission as well. So that woundedness becomes actually a motivation to make a positive difference in their lives and other people's lives. So this has to do with, again, our ability to stay connected with vision, with what I'm calling this generative state. One of the things we would say is that part of what is NLP, I always like to say, if you go to the Rome and the Sistine Chapel, and you see there's this painting by Michelangelo on
Yeah.
the ceiling where God is reaching down and Adam is reaching up and their fingers are about to touch. And I said, that's NLP is that little spark in between the two fingers. So that this, to me, what this image of God represents is what we would call the world of quantum imagination. There's many, many possibilities.
Yes.
And our world is created because certain people are able to reach into that world of possibilities and bring in iPads, iPhones, digital video,
Yeah, amazing.
So these things that they're always possible. They were possible since the earth began, but they're not created until we can open our filters, our imagination, begin to envision them, and then find a way to bring it across this bridge into everyday reality, mechanical, classical reality. So you have this quantum world of possibility and classical reality, and geniuses and successful people are the ones that can cross this bridge and access to it.
Yes.
But then find a way to bring it and manifest it here.
Not only idea, but also the ability to create it.
Yeah. And this is why I was saying this is one of the places where belief becomes so important.
Yeah.
There's this saying that people say,
It's amazing for me because I'm just thinking and you answer my questions without asking you my questions.
We have a good resonance. So anyway, I was going to say that, we, in my modeling work, for example, to me, Walt Disney represents a really great example of this, where he had these three basic ways of using his filters. The dreamer, opening to what I'm calling this quantum imagination, the world of possibilities. But then the realist. So I've got to make it. If it stays just an idea, so I've got to believe in it. And I always like to say, people are often going, well, when I see it, I'll believe it. And I say, by then it's too late. I mean, you don't need to believe it anymore. You need to believe in something before it's real. I work with people who have a lot of health problems. My mother, for example, had a stage 4 breast cancer and was told that she didn't have more than a few months to live. And she ended up living another 20 years, almost 20 years, 18 years. So I always like to say, when do you most need to believe that you can be well? Not when you're well, if it's when you're the most sick. It's actually when reality is the opposite. That's when you have to believe it's possible to create something else.
Yeah, and how we can create this kind of belief.
Yeah. Well.
Yes, because just
yeah.
When I do interviews of successful people, it's amazing what are their belief systems.
Yeah.
And I can write those beliefs and just say to my audience, okay, believe that. But they say, okay, they believe in themselves. They believe they can do it, but how can I believe also?
That's a great question, because this is exactly what we mean by neuro-linguistic programming. A belief is a classic example of a neuro-linguistic programming. There's a linguistic part, right? What you can write down, what you can tell people, but that's not the belief yet. That's the linguistic part of the belief. Now you've got to get it into the nervous system. And actually in the Etra Coach book, there's some work on beliefs, and one of the very basic starting points is you've got to get it not just here. Right? I've got to get it here, here, here. And these are actually, one of the things that we have to realize is that, our brain is a big part of our programming, but it's not all of our programming. Yeah? They realize now there's a brain in the belly. They call it the enteric nervous system. There's 140 million nerve cells there. There's 3 trillion connections.
Wow.
They say that's as many connections as in a cat brain. So you have a cat brain here, at least. And also in the heart. In the heart, it's not just a pump that is run by the brain. It actually also has its own system. And I have a colleague, for example, who was head of surgery at Harvard University Medical School, where they did heart transplants. And he was telling me about a patient a very common experience where this patient got a heart transplant. And after he recovered, he started acting strangely. Like he started craving foods that he'd never liked before. And he became obsessed with a certain kind of music. And he would find himself going places and he didn't understand why he was there. And he thought he was going crazy until they got permission to look into the life history of the donor, where the heart came from. And they found these foods were the favorite foods of the donor. That the donor was a musician, and this was the music that he played, and that all of these places that this guy would find himself, the patient would find himself going to, was somewhere where something significant had happened in the life of the donor. So somehow this knowledge was transferred in the cellular memory or in the memory of the heart. So it's not just here that we have intelligence. It's here. It's here. And to believe something, yes, you've got to have it here, but it's got to be here and here. So there's actually an assessment that we do where you say something and you really sense for the resonance.
Let's take an example. For example, I want to, can I say reinforce?
Yes.
I want to reinforce the belief that I can be successful in English.
Yes. Good. That's great.
Because I'm speaking in English now and I want to do speaking engagements in English. And sometimes I will not have the best English. How can I do to build the best belief I can?
So first of all, usually to do something like this, you build a belief system. It's not just a single belief. There's 5 basic beliefs.
Okay.
First is, I want it, right? It's important.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for example, you have to believe it's important to learn English because there's a lot of other things going on in your life. Yeah? And you could go, yeah, I want to, but it's number 25 on my list.
I can say I want it.
The second is that it's possible. I have to believe it's possible to learn English. Okay. The third is that it's appropriate, meaning it fits for me, right? Because this is very interesting. Some people will go, yeah, well, it doesn't fit in my life, or it's not. Sometimes we say it's about it fitting, about it being ecological. So does it fit for you?
I think so.
But I think so is not so much.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one. Okay, we'll come back to that in just a moment.
Okay.
The fourth one is I'm capable. I have the ability and I have the support.
I think it's maybe here that I'm struggling.
Okay.
Because I'm learning English, but it's slow.
Okay.
It's slow, so sometimes.
So we'll come back to that one. So we you go, yes, for sure, I want it. For sure, it's possible. Maybe the fit, I think so. I'm struggling a little bit with I'm capable. The final one though is I deserve it. I merit it. I'm worth it.
Yes.
Okay. Good. I like that. But also then, and I'm responsible to do it. It's up to me. It's up to me. Okay. So those are the 5. And you can already tell, even just by going over them, some are more strong than others.
Yes.
Now, the other thing we would do for these ones that are not so strong, like you said, all right, I'm capable. Let's look at this one. And capable means I have the ability, but also the support. I have the support that I need, and I have the ability. Now, what you're going to do is, first of all, when you think about it, this comes back to this notion of having your outcome, your desired state, because it's abstract to say learn English. So one of the very first things you would want to do is to have, since you already see I want it and it's possible, to have first a mental image of yourself.
I have one.
To see it. Okay?
I can see.
And also, remember I was saying a somatic model. And what I mean by that is, and I'm going to ask you to, this is the thing, is if you could speak English, how would you show it with your body? What would it be like that? Would it be like this? I mean, what? So if you could,
I can see myself moving on the stage.
Yeah, and show. I mean, if you were speaking on the stage in English, what would you look like? You don't even have to say the words, but what would you be?
I think it's kind of flow.
Like this.
Yes.
Okay, so like this. Okay, so now you're going to take that image, you're going to take that feeling, you take that, of course, the statement of the goal, I can learn English. And now, as you see that, you're simply going to say, I am capable, I'm able to learn English.
I am able to learn English.
Okay. Now, check in here in your head. Say it again. I'm able to learn English. And
Loudly?
Yeah, you can say it out loud or.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am able to learn English.
Now, in your head right now, how much, you believe other things. So think of a few other things that you believe. How much on a scale of 0 to 10 in your head would you say it's 10? Or is it 5? Is it 6? Is it 2?
7.
7.
Yes.
Okay. Now, here in your heart, you can say it again.
I'm able to learn English.
You know yourself that when you really believe in something, your heart is a big part of it. What is this resonance in your heart? If 0 to 10. Is it also 7? Or is it more? Is it
8.
It's 8.
Yes.
Third is going to be here. People talk about it I have a gut feeling. I know so again, I am able to learn English.
I'm able to learn English. It's maybe less here.
Yeah.
6 maybe.
It's interesting because I know that as you're saying it, this is one of the interesting things about being a coach on the outside.
Yes.
Your voice was very different.
Yes.
It was more flat. I'm able to learn English.
Okay.
As opposed to. So now, let's say you go, so there's two ways that you can increase your belief.
Okay.
And NLP offers 2 of them. One is by changing around the way that you are experiencing it to yourself, right? So we call these things, the representational systems, pictures, the words, the feeling. But there's also the quality of those that we call submodalities.
Yes.
For example, you see that in the picture in your mind that you see of yourself.
Yes.
How close is it? How big is it? Is it color? Is it moving?
Color, moving, maybe size like that.
Yeah.
The distance is 1 meter. 1 meter.
Yeah. Notice
I can see myself.
Yeah. For a moment, if you brought it closer, bring it to 0.5 meter.
Okay.
Say, I'm capable.
I'm capable.
To do that, to learn.
Yes, I'm capable.
What happens? It's here. What do you?
I felt immediately difference here.
Yeah.
The first one, then maybe more here.
Yeah.
And I can feel now.
Now something more here.
Yes, a difference here.
So notice.
Yes.
This is the magic of neurolinguistic programming. We all have this capability. Nobody teaches us that at school.
Yes.
Nobody even teaches us that in transformational seminars, that, hey, you are in charge. It's the way that your nervous system, this is what I'm calling about the filters. Huh? This was this quantum possibility, a possibility for you to be able to speak English very, very well. Huh? It's right now, it's out there in that world of quantum possibility. To bring it here, you adjust these filters. And believe me, a lot of learning anything, but especially learning language, is not a conscious cognitive study. It's like a child. Child doesn't learn a language by looking in books, right?
Emotional.
You absorb it, yeah. So, but my point is, by adjusting the way that you're thinking about it,
yes,
it already makes a difference.
Yes.
Now we can also look at a couple of other things. You could go directly to the feeling here. When, for example, down here in your stomach, when you were saying, it's less, maybe it's less than 7. How do you know it's less than 7? I mean, what do you feel something there? Do you feel a tightness? Is there a temperature? I mean, really, when you're thinking, I'm not so sure. What does that feel like?
It's maybe a kind of pressure.
A pressure.
Yes.
Now, if you were able to just for a moment
Yes.
take a breath and lighten that pressure, and then say, I'm capable to learn English.
I'm capable to learn English. It's making a difference.
It's making a difference.
Yes.
That's the notion. I mean, just what you're experiencing right now is the reality of neuro-linguistic programming. Right?
Great.
So, boom. And what's going to be interesting is, and this is the idea of belief. Remember, we said belief isn't the same as the capability, but it opens that door. And because if I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm going to try to learn English.
Okay, you start to feel it.
Yeah. So now you start to feel it. Now here's another strategy. Okay. So we said I can adjust my own inner experience, but we can also use role models and mentors, right? So remember we talked about modeling.
Yes.
So here would be just a very simple example of this.
Yes.
If you
have to do it after.
Yes. So if you think about your heart, your head, your heart, your belly.
Okay.
Who is somebody that you really? Well, first of all, if you were going to go from say 7 or 8 to 9 or 10, what resource would you need to have in the head or the heart or the belly? I mean, what would have to be there for you to go 10? Would it be confidence? Would it be enthusiasm? Yes. Would it be, that's what I mean by a resource. I mean, something inner. Would it be if I had more confidence, if I had
It's a kind of a power, self-confidence, but maybe I represent that with power.
Yeah. So kind of a personal power.
Yes, personal power.
Now, who would be your role model or your mentor for that kind of personal power and that kind of confidence? Who do you know? I mean, you've interviewed hundreds of people, so I'm sure that you probably met somebody that has exactly that kind of confidence and personal power that you would need to be able to learn English. Who would that be?
It's not someone I interviewed.
Okay.
But I have a lot of people during my interviews.
But it doesn't have to be someone you're
interviewing. I have two people. A French one who is Oussama Amar is a French, but I love the way he speaks English.
Yeah.
And the other one, him, it's Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins.
The way he speaks and
absolutely.
the confidence he has
about
his personal power. So
okay, so we're going to take both of these guys.
Yes.
So what's the name of the first guy?
Oussama
Ama. Oussama Ama. So right now, if you were going to have Oussama Ama around you to support you, remember I said it's about capability and support. Where would you experience his presence? I mean, would it be to your right, to your left, behind you, in front of you?
Here.
Right there. And where would Tony be?
Maybe here.
There. Now, for just a moment, remember we were talking about this idea of quickly modeling.
Yes.
If you just put yourself into Oussama Ama for just a moment, and you're looking at yourself, like through his eyes.
Okay.
What would be his message to you? Now you're him. What is your message to David? Oussama Ama. David's going, I want to learn English, but what is you're his role model and his mentor. What would be your message, which might be, in words, it might just be
I have the message.
Yeah.
Practice.
Practice.
Yes, practice.
Practice.
And also just go in the USA and speak.
Just go and speak. Practice and go and speak. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if you take that message, now come back to yourself. And you're going to take that message in your head, in your heart, in your belly. Practice. And just go and do it. And really, and you feel his presence, and you feel that message in your head, your heart, and your belly. And I want now say again, I am capable to learn English.
I am capable to learn English.
And now notice, I even see when you say that, it's your breath afterwards that even, I mean, as an NLP person and as a coach, I can see your nervous system processing that really differently right now than when you started. Now we're going to really add more here. So let's take Tony.
Yes, Tony.
So for just a moment, you know, again, kind of leave yourself, put yourself in Tony's eyes. Here he is, and you're looking at yourself as he is, like he's in front of you, but now you're him looking at you. So you're Tony taking on his belief, his experience, you know, you're in him. And what is your message as Tony to David? Called speed modeling. So you're Tony now, and you have this message for David. What would you say to David?
Yes, I have two message. Take risks. So I mean for me to do speeches in English, not only to go in the USA, but
to
directly speak English and the other things to build an English environment. Yes.
Build an English.
To have more English entrepreneurs.
Yeah, great. Now, before you leave Tony, the one other thing I want you to do is, if you, as you are in Tony, and you experience him, what do you experience most about the difference between being in his body and his nervous system with that sense of power and confidence than yours when you're trying to learn English? I mean, I'm sure you have confidence in a lot of other areas, but what do you notice and where do you experience it as Tony? And this is where we're talking about modeling somebody really quickly.
The main difference, it was more about my mental.
Yeah.
So it was the feeling that nothing is impossible.
Great.
So.
And exactly, just for a moment.
Yes.
What is that? Because you said it's a feeling. So we'll go a little bit more deeply into that feeling. If you're Tony, where and how do you have this feeling? You said it's in the head. It's kind of more mental, but how do you experience it? Is it because this
it's again a flow in all this part of my body.
Yeah.
Yes. Just a move.
Yeah. Just this a quality of movement. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Now the other thing is, another big part of NLP is anchoring, right?
Yes.
So first of all, keep yourself in Tony.
It's not a small example.
Find your anchor. Find your anchor.
Okay.
And an anchor would be either a movement or an image, something that allows you, that goes, I can get access to this right now, right away. As soon as I do it, I see you breathing. But if you were going to make a movement or a gesture or a touch of yourself somewhere, what would you do to anchor this feeling of everything is possible?
Yes!
Yes, okay.
I have one anchor with Tony.
Yeah.
Because I met him in Chicago.
Yeah. He's a great guy. He's a great guy. So now, come back to yourself.
Okay.
Now, you're going to go, all right, you take his message.
Yes,
his message was take risks. His message was build an English environment. But you're also taking that feeling.
Yes.
And you're going to go, I can learn English. Okay. Ready? I'm capable. I am capable.
I am capable.
Now check your head, your heart, your belly.
Yeah, it's different. Thank you very much. Thank you. I will invite you to my next speech
okay.
in California.
All right. It's a deal. It's a deal.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Huge example.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way, rather than talk about something or explain it, is let's do it.
And they can.
And we're going to find out. We're going to find out how well this works. I mean, so it's not just a theory. This is this idea, reaching into this world of possibilities and bringing it into this reality. And that's how. I mean, that's how you do it. I mean, there are strategies. There's learning strategies for learning languages. But my experience has been that with belief has this, that our capabilities are not only our conscious understanding. I was talking about my mother. This is exactly the first thing I was doing with my mother, right? Because my mother was told by the doctors, you're going to die. And so I was saying, well, what's your goal? What do you want? She said, well, I don't have a future. I said, wait. If you did, what would it be like? And it was very interesting, by the way. I think this is an interesting lesson for us. Because when my mother first got this breast cancer, she got it twice, right? And the first time, all she wanted to do was get rid of it. It scared her. It was something that she thought was was an obstacle. She just wanted her old life back, right? She wanted her old life back as quickly as possible. So she just had it removed. She went right back to her old life and didn't change a thing. So it was a surprise to her, but maybe not so much of a surprise when less than 2 years later, it came back, because maybe the things she was doing in her old life were part of what created it. So now actually, and this is the interesting thing, this second time, this crisis was the worst thing that ever happened to her. Her life, she felt like her life was over. And, then for sure her old life was over. So it was interesting. Then when I started saying, well, okay, maybe it's over, but what would you want? If there was a future that was worth living for, what would it be? And you know what the interesting thing was? The things she began to see were nothing like her old life, right? She was thinking, I want to be a singer. She wanted to be an actress.
She started to have a kind of authorization.
Yeah, and open into, right? Because what happens, we get limited by our programming. We get stuck in security and safety. So she wanted, things like, she had been a nurse. Well, in her new life, she wouldn't be a nurse. She would be an actress. Huh?
Wow.
And it was, by the way, it was very interesting, because I remember being surprised once I turned on television, there was my mother on television, or walked into our local bank and there's a poster and there's my mother's face. So she became an actress.
Wow.
But my point is, first she had to have the idea of it, and then we had to say, do you want it? Then, is it possible? Then, does that fit with who you are? Then, are you capable to do it? And then, do you deserve it? And one of the most difficult ones for her was, do I deserve it? And this is the interesting thing about programming, David, because it's not that somebody told her, you don't deserve it. Was
it hard for you to do that with your mother?
No, but I do want to say something, because I think it's important to say, because sometimes people hear this story and they go, I should do that with my mother. And I think your motivation has to be clear. In psychotherapy, they say, oh, you're not supposed to work with your family because you have to have a certain distance. But what I find is that it's not so much the necessity of distance, it's what is your motive? If I'm doing it for myself, right, then it's not helping somebody else. So what often happens with people when they're doing any kind of coaching is it becomes about me, right? I want to succeed. I want to do well. I'm going to make sure this happens. And so it starts becoming not so much about me helping you as me proving myself. So the very first thing I had to do with my mother before I said anything to her was, I had to go, what is my motivation? If I'm truly here because I think there's something I could offer her as help, then why not? If I start going, oh, I need to prove that this, or I can't, I'm too scared and I feel responsible for you. Now I'm not really being a coach anymore. It's more about me. So I think this is when I talk to people about working with people that you're close to, you have to be able to be in that place of service. And for me, that was something that was clear. I could be of service. So then I could help her. And what I was going to say that was very interesting is when we got to this place of do you deserve it, it was kind of it wasn't going in here and here. In her mind, she's thinking, of course I deserve it. But so we just said, let's look here. And actually what was interesting is that what came out was that my mother's mother and her older sister had both died of breast cancer. And nobody ever said anything. Yeah? There was nothing verbally spoken, but the feeling was, who am I to be, any better than them? These were my role models, and I don't deserve, they didn't live, I don't deserve it. And it would be almost like disloyal to them. It would be like breaking something. So, and this is another very interesting part of NLP. Rather than try to argue that or say, oh, that's wrong, or you shouldn't think that, all I said was, I think this I hear that loyalty is a very important value. This loyalty and connection. I said, but what I notice is you're only looking to the past. If you looked as far to the future and you saw your daughter and my sister and your daughter's daughter are looking at you like you're looking at your mother, what would you want them to be loyal to? And of course, in a fraction of a second, it was clear, well, no, I wouldn't want them to think they have to die to be loyal to me. And it, boom. And this is this great thing about NLP. In 1 second, this big problem is gone. Not because you did anything magical, but because suddenly now I have a bigger picture, right? I see more than, like, if I'm only limiting to this and I'm looking to the past and what the reality has been as opposed to what it can be. And anyway, in that moment, it was clear, well, what I would want is to be the best of myself and deal with any crisis, not with, depression and negativity, but with all of my resources. And that's what began this journey of a remarkable recovery. And 18 more years. And she used to say, I got lucky. I got 2 lives. Most people only get 1.
Yes.
And my second life was so much better than my first. And then she would say that getting the cancer the second time was the best thing that ever happened.
I was thinking to ask you, is there an opportunity for her?
Yeah. And this is what I find is very interesting about NLP, right? The worst thing that ever happened to her becomes the best thing that ever happened to her. What's the difference that makes the difference? It's not the thing. It's not what happened. It's you and how you engage it. And when you engage it with your generativity, your resources, your full belief, you can do it. And so I know English will be piece of cake for you.
Easy. You told just before about genius and Einstein told a lot about the power of imagination.
Yeah.
Do you think we can, and how, not do you think, how we can develop or maybe unleash our imagination?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is one of the things actually I'm doing even here in Paris. We just started last weekend a course called Generative Coaching. And generative coaching is precisely about this. It's how the idea of generative, because genius is the same root as generative, right? And it begins with your state. And NLP says everything begins with your state. And there's a difference between what we call a coach state and a crash state. And coach is the letters that means I'm centered in my body. So you'd have to do it. You kind of you ground your feet. You find what's called the vertical axis. The vertical axis means that you're not like this, like this. It doesn't mean it's not rigid, but what you find is that the spine, all of the nerves that come everywhere in the body come through the vertebrae. And if I do this with my spine, I'm actually, distorting and shutting things, or this, So now it doesn't mean your vertical axis doesn't mean you're straight like a rod, because also your spine is meant to be like if it was perfectly straight, you would damage yourself just walking because they would be hitting each other. But it's kind of more like a spring. So but the idea is you want the channel open. So that's centered, and then the centering in all performance arts, whether it's martial arts, singing, dancing, presenting, you center. You don't center here, you center there. And in fact, the more challenging something is, you've got to center lower. If you're going to break a board, you're not going to break it from being centered there, right? You're going to be there, and all of your power comes from there. So the centering is, I'm in my vertical axis, and this is literally the physical center of the body. It's in between the feet and the head. So like here, the hara, they say in Japan, or tantian in China. This is and it's not just a physical center, it's an energetic center. So you center there, then you open, and you're going to open the heart center or open the chest. Like if people do this, right? If you close it, this is not confident. Right? So you open it, you don't puff it, but it's open. But also the heart center is open. So centered. And I even have people neuro-linguistically down in the belly. You can bring the words to the belly. I'm centered, or I'm present. And into the heart, I'm open. Then the A of coach, COA, is alert, right? Aware, awake, conscious. So and this is in the head center. My eyes, all the distance senses are here: eyes, ears, nose, mouth. So you awaken the head, and then that awakening extends to the whole body. So you're aware of the whole body. So that's the A: centered, open, aware.
Yes.
The second C, so the COAC is
Yeah.
connected.
Yes.
Connected. I'm connected to myself, and then connected to. So I'm a whole and a whole on. I'm connected to the earth, up the vertical axis through the crown of the head. I'm connected to the sky, stars. This is what geniuses do. I mean, Einstein was.
Yes.
So I feel a sense of connection to a larger self.
Okay.
So centered,
Einstein was
open,
doing that.
Alert, yeah. Connected. So was Mozart.
Yes.
And people like Mozart, you got to understand, people like Mozart didn't say, I sat there and I figured out the music. He said, basically, the music came to me. I didn't make it. It comes, every genius will say, it comes to me.
Inspiration.
It comes through me. It comes to me, not out of my conscious mind. I need my conscious mind to structure it, but it's the editor, not the author. The author is the creative unconscious. So I open that channel, connected, and then the H of coach is, in English we would say holding, but in French it works better to say hospitality. Yeah? Hospitality.
Right.
So I'm centered, I'm open, I'm alert, I'm connected in myself to my environment and welcoming.
Yeah.
Now, so that's the first step of any kind of genius, is it starts by opening this generative state. Then, to direct it, I've got to set an intention, right? I bring something to it, like learn an English.
Do you make difference between intention and goal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The difference between an intention and a goal, and this is actually fairly important from a genius perspective. In a goal, I know what is the destination.
The result.
Yeah. With an intention, it's a direction, and I'm not sure what I'm going to find when I start. So it's more of an exploration. So
okay, I'm going here.
Yeah, I'm going that way. Like in my mother's case, my mother didn't say, well, in 2 years from now, I'm going to be doing this. She said, basically, I choose to go in the direction of health as far as I can go, and whatever that will be. Right?
Okay.
So it's more generative because it's not they say convergent. I'm not just going to a certain point. I'm actually opening
the field of possibility.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
So then you set an intention in this way we were talking about. We usually say 5 words or less. If you have somebody, you're coaching somebody, start going, well, my intention is blah 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 blah. They're not going to remember it anyway.
Okay, can you give an example of your intention, for example?
Sure. I mean, my intention, for example, is almost always about creating a world to which people want to belong. Create a world to which people want to belong. So that could be making a context in which people thrive, including myself.
Is it different for you than your mission?
Well, the intention is connected to my mission. Actually, what you'll find is an intention has these different dimensions of mission. That will be part of it.
Okay.
Vision and ambition. Ambition is also very important. So my mission is what I'm bringing to others. My vision is what I want to see in the world. But my mission, so what I want to see in the world isn't about me. My mission is about me. That's why we say it's part of my identity.
But for example, Martin Luther King, his vision was to have the world in peace.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's his vision, a peaceful world. But his mission, was something very specific. His mission was to be a leader in making that happen. Right?
Yes.
So it's like, you take somebody like, I often say this about Kennedy. Kennedy, at the same time, was saying we're going to put a vision to put somebody on the moon. Right? We're going to go to the moon. But Kennedy's mission wasn't going to be an astronaut, right? That wasn't his mission in that. His mission was to lead, and to, create the
energy,
the both political energy and the structural energy to make it happen. So mission is different than vision. Vision is what I want to see. Mission is
what I can do to help the visions come.
Yeah. Now, your ambition is basically how am I going to grow through this? Ambition is this desire for growth and mastery. And that's about me, right? So vision and mission are about something outside of me.
Okay.
My ambition is, what kind of life do I want to make? What is my life? And that my life, of course, relates to my mission, but it's also my life. Like Steve Jobs said, he said, your time is limited, so don't waste it living somebody else's life. Don't get caught by the dogma, he says, and don't let the noise of other people's opinion drown out your own inner voice. So another part of this is, what is my life? And this was like my example of my mother. That was precisely what happened. Her old life was not her life. Right? It was the one that she thought she should have. That it's what people give you appreciation for, and they say, "Oh yeah, good girl, good boy." Yeah. But your life might not be that. Right? It might not be what your parents think you should do, and it might not be what society says is the right thing. So your ambition is also as important as your mission and your vision, because it's kind of like my vision for me. And
okay, great.
How far do I want to go? So every athlete, right? An athlete, they have a mission. They're serving their team, but they also have their ambition. I want to achieve something. So for you, you have your mission. You're bringing things into the world, but you have your ambition, which is, I want to achieve a certain level of recognition, a certain level of status, because, and when it really works well, that ambition supports the mission and the vision, and that's when you really get success. Where I see a lot of people struggle is their ambition. Either they think ambition is bad, so they don't have any, or their ambition is in conflict with their mission. Right? I'm trying to build this life for myself, even though my gifts would be to contribute here. I think I have to do this, or people get too caught in their own. Let's say if you have a inflated sense of yourself, then people get so stuck in their own level of achieving. So just as an example, there was a person that I was coaching a couple of years ago, a good person actually here. It's a young guy, maybe in his 30s. He was already the CEO of his division of his company. So he seemed to be successful. But when I was, he said, yeah, our company's been growing. He says, I've got this job. I get a lot of recognition. I'm well paid. I said, yeah, so what's the problem? And he said, given the way this job is and how it's structured, the way he put it, he said, I'm not going to work with a sparkle in my eye. There's no sparkle in my eye. And so I got 20 more years here. I don't want to go to work a zombie. And I said, well, what would give you a sparkle in your eye? And at first he said, oh, that's crazy. It's crazy what would give me.
But the people who can say that.
And I said, maybe it's crazy, but I'm from California. You'd probably be difficult to surprise me too much. But anyway, what he said was something like, what I would do is I would leave all of this and I would go into the desert and help people who were suffering that couldn't help themselves. That's what would bring the sparkle in my eye. He would basically leave this whole corporate world. So what he was saying is, I've achieved this ambition, but there's no feeling of mission there. So I said, okay, wait, it's not either or, but if you were to really hold these two desires, right, your desire to serve the world, but also, because he was saying, it's crazy, I can't do that. I have a wife and 4 children. I'm the CEO of this company. But we started holding that and making room for it. Right? Because this is where the programming comes in. He couldn't see any way. This was his only image of what that kind of service would be like. That's where programming comes in. It was his only representation of sort of living from the heart. So he said, look, let's open. There's a lot of possibilities out there. And actually, interestingly enough, he ended up, throughout it was a long journey. A couple of years journey, but he's now the head of the company and still in the same company, but doing things, in a way it's the same and in a way it's completely different. And this is what I think a lot of this idea of, you know, don't be trapped by the dogma, you know, listen to your inner voice. Look out there, there's many, many, many possibilities. You know, there's a whole world of possibilities. And so,
And what the changes he makes?
well, first change that he made was, you know, what I was saying about Steve Jobs, is he said he started to realize how much of his life was trying to, trying to please others, trying to do his duty, right? Because he, you know, he was very duty driven, and he never had time for himself. So some of the first, as his coach, some of my first assignments were, I said, you know, make time for yourself. You know, Carl Jung, the psychologist, said you have to make time for things in your life that have nothing to do with your family and nothing to do with your work. That means they only have to do with you. And for a lot of people, right, a lot of really driven people, the only way they do that is through addictions. Through drinking, through smoking. It's the one thing they do for themselves, not for anybody else. It's what they do for them. So I say, you've got to make time for things that you do for you. For me, for example, every day I run. I run for an hour to an hour and a half. And I do that not because I'm trying to, it's because I love it, and it's the thing I do for me every day. And in that time, that's when I open my generative state. And when I'm out running, everything's possible.
Okay, so the conclusion can be to do what we love every day, and it opens the field of possibility.
You got it.
Wow, I love this answer, and I have to make a difference in my own life, because when you do what you love, it's not maybe easy, just for me, for example, to see the difference between work and to do something for me.
Exactly.
Because when I'm doing that, I don't know if I'm working.
I believe me, I know it. I know what you mean.
So when do you know the difference?
I think this is where I think it becomes very important. This is the whole, it's an awareness practice, because it's easy to kind of get caught into this. Remember, I was talking about coach state. So here's actually in NLP, we have a term that's called calibration.
Yes.
Calibration means it's a quality of self-awareness. I mean, it comes from a very technical thing about you calibrate an instrument, meaning you're really, you know, knowing how well it measures and very fine measurement. So with self-calibration, it's about knowing yourself. And so if we take coach as one side, the other side is what we call crash. And so you're either coach or crash. You know, crash is another set of letters. So instead of centered, I'm contracted, right? So there's tension. Instead of open, I'm reactive, right? I'm just reacting. This is coming in, I'm reacting. Instead of open. Instead of aware and alert, I'm in the crash. A is analysis paralysis, right? I'm analyzing. Instead of connection, that's separation, right? Disconnecting here from my body, from my friends, something like this. Or the H that's in crash, instead of hospitality, hurting or hating or something like that. So you have coach on one side, crash on the other. And it's not all or nothing. It's sometimes you find yourself, I'm at my desk and I'm not breathing. So that's already telling me maybe I'm not, I mean, yes, I'm doing what I love, but I'm kind of getting also caught in this programming of I have to finish this, I've got to do it. If I don't do it, something. And so.
Okay, you do what you love, but not in the right way.
Yeah. Exactly. You start pushing yourself, and that's
I know that also.
Because of unconscious programming. Yeah. There's this great article I saw, by the way, that I think is very interesting for us, for people in general, but it's called The 5 Lessons from Dying People. And this woman was a nurse.
I love this.
Have you seen this article?
Yes, I share that in all my conferences.
Yeah. And I think that tells us some things.
Yes.
So live your life to keep connection with your friends, to express yourself, you know, what is it, you know, that you're feeling, you know, to let yourself be happy. That was another one that I think is, so can I allow myself to be happy in what I'm doing? So I often use those too as my sort of
To remember. I have a last question.
Yes.
Because a lot of people in my audience are coaches.
Yeah.
I have more and more coaches that they ask me how to become better coaches. What are the difference between a powerful coach and maybe a basic coach?
Well, I think first of all, already you said something. If you look at our levels, you said something really important. When people go to a class, you learn behaviors and capabilities. So two people that have exactly the same level of skill. So that's very different than you have these other levels: motivation, values. Is a coach a role? I'm a coach, or is a coach a mission? That's why we said at that level of identity, and not everybody even takes on coach at the level of identity. What does it mean at the level of identity? I am a coach, and so then the other part has to do with your purpose, with your vision, right? And so I think being a coach is not just a set of skills. You can have, I teach NLP classes and coaching classes, and basically all the tools, all the models reach the level of capability. How? But to go to the next levels, nobody can teach it to you, right? It's not a function of somebody explaining it to you. As we were just experiencing, belief is something that happens inside of you that's relating to your goals. And then there's your mission, your identity. So for me, the difference is that the powerful coaches are the ones where the coaching is not just a skill. It's a value, it's a mission, it's a purpose. It's what their life is, it's like when they're coaching, they're going, this is what I was made to do, right? No, not, well, this is how I'm going to earn my next money, this is, it touches here, 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 and it, it brings you on fire.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah.
I would like to know the difference between how to use tools and intuition. So sometimes I'm struggling because I do some things that it's not in the tools. I just follow my intuition.
Yeah.
And do you think every coach has to be ready to not follow the process of a tool?
I think, look, tools are tools. That, as we said, exactly in this program that I'm doing on generative coaching, and that's, we even call it generative coaching. It's not just regular coaching where I can only use these toolboxes, right? Generative means that sometimes I'm going to create something that I don't even know. And it's not, and here's the important thing, that to be truly generative, it's not, we say the basic definition of generative is 1 + 1 makes 3, not 1 + 1 makes 2. If I'm only using my tools, 1 + 1 makes 2. But in real coaching, in generative coaching, I'm in my generative state, you're in your generative state, and something magic happens between us. Something begins to come that neither of our conscious minds would have ever thought about or expected, right? Something begins to emerge. And I think about, I was fortunate to have, one of my mentors and role models was Milton Erickson, who was probably the most successful therapist, coach that has ever lived. And when we would go down and try to interview Erickson like this, we'd say, well, Milton, what do you do if I have this client, what would you do?
I don't know.
I don't know, right? He would always say, I don't know. So I really don't know with that particular person in that moment. I don't know. But you always would add, I'm very curious to discover what's possible. I'm very curious to discover what's possible. So I think, and that's the moment in where what we're calling intuition is what we're saying is the creative unconscious. And it's not just anything. In our work with generative coaching, we talk about disciplined flow. Disciplined flow. And discipline means, I practice. They say 10,000 hours, right? So I practice. But flow means I'm not rigidly held. It's I'm also open to let something come. So you have a right brain and a left brain, right? The left brain is, okay, here's the tool. The right brain, which is equally there, is here's something that I never thought of before. Here's something nobody's ever said before. Nobody's ever done before. I'm not following the rules in the book. Nobody's ever done this before. That's what Erickson did. How many things do you read that nobody ever did before? That's why he's a genius. That's why he's generative. I often like to give the example, of this that's the so-called miracle on the Hudson. That was about 3.5 years ago. This pilot's taking off out of New York City airport.
Yeah.
And right at the key part of takeoff, they suddenly come across unexpectedly a big flock of birds. So many birds are pulled into the engines of the airplane that they both shut down simultaneously. So now you're like a couple of thousand meters and suddenly there's no engines and the plane is going down. What do you do? I mean, if you crash, right, in panic inside, if your state is not generative, it's not a miracle, it's a disaster. So this pilot has to keep in this coach state, centered, open, aware, connected, and basically welcoming what's there. Because if you don't welcome what is, if you're going, this can't be happening, So you've got to, this is what's happening. And then, he was able, that they were telling him, turn around and come back to the airport, and he's like, that's the rule. Okay, forget that. Go to the nearest airport. No, forget that. But obviously, also, he's in a situation where you can't look in your pilot manual and say, okay, what's the tool here? What's the procedure? There is no procedure. Nobody's ever been in that position. You've got to make it up, right? You've got to create the miracle. Nobody's going to be able to give you the recipe. You've got to rely on your skill and your intuition, right? And he was able to, guide the plane. The only place he could see to land it was in the Hudson River. But he'd done gliding before, but in little planes, not in a passenger jet, So he's having to use skills, transfer these skills, use his creative unconscious. He gets the plane, lands it there, and basically they said that first of all, the first difference between a miracle and a disaster is his state. If he loses his inner game, right? If he crashes inside, it's going to crash on the outside. When he lands the plane, he walks the entire length of the plane twice to make sure nobody's left on. He's the last one off. Everybody survives. Very different than certain Italian cruise ship a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
This Korean, ferry that just was a big disaster, where the crew and the pilots are off first. So what allows him to do that is his state. Now they asked him, and I think this is very interesting, very, very interesting. Maybe a good way to summarize, the interview. They asked him, how did you? They said you landed this plane. You seemed so calm. They said, weren't you afraid? And you know what his answer was? He said, are you crazy? I've never been more afraid in my life. I've never been more afraid in my life. Are you crazy? He said, and I've never been more calm in my life.
Mm.
So now, well, what do you mean, right? Well, of course, he said, I'm afraid. I'm, as a whole, but there's more than that. And actually, they said, well, what helped you to be calm, even though you were in this dangerous situation? You were never more afraid in your life. And I always like to point out, by the way, that, if you're not afraid, you don't need courage. Courage is irrelevant. It's unnecessary unless you're afraid. So, well, what is courage? Courage is, I'm connected to something bigger than the fear. The fear is there. I'm connected to something much bigger than that. So then they asked him.
Your brain follow what is the bigger,
yeah,
the contrast.
Exactly. And you have three brains, they say, by the way. You have a reptile brain,
yeah,
a mammal brain, and then the human brain. When you're in fear comes from the reptile brain and the mammal brain. And that's why I always tell my coachees, I say, I will have to let you know that no amount of coaching, no amount of drugs is going to take away your fear. You will always have a reptile brain the rest of your life. The good news is you've got much more than that, right? You will feel fear. You will feel anger. You will feel sad. You have a reptile brain. But you're much more than that, so that the skills are about how do I, and especially in a dangerous situation, how do I connect out to that generative part, that quantum imagination? So this pilot said 4 things that I thought were really interesting. The first thing he said, like one of your mentors told you about learning English, was practice.
Yeah.
And he said, I never was in that situation before, but I had a lot of practice staying calm. I practiced a lot managing myself, my state. And he said I had a lot of experience. And he said, the way he put it, he said, I think I had enough experience in my bank that I could make a big withdrawal, right? So
Yeah.
I could use that experience. The second thing he said, I think was very interesting, is he said, well, yes, I was afraid for myself, but the pilot, right? It's my mission to land the plane safely. So yes, I'm me, but I'm more than me, right? I'm something bigger than just me. I'm the pilot. I'm the leader. It's my mission.
Yeah.
So so first practice, then staying connected to something, an identity beyond your individual role, individual self, right? Because your mission is what connects you to something bigger. The third thing he said was interesting. He said, because we were talking about your mentors and your role models and your support. He said, well, I was able to stay calm because the crew was so calm and the passengers stayed calm. So they asked the crew, why were you calm? And they said, well, the pilot was calm and the passengers were calm. And they asked the passengers, why were you calm? And they said, well, the pilots were seemed calm and the crew was calm. So they created what we call a field, right? All those mirror neurons are supporting each other.
Environment. Yes.
And actually, the fourth thing he said that I thought was really interesting, and it goes back to something I said before about transforming our wounds. He talked about the suicide of his father, which some years before his father had committed suicide, and it was the biggest sort of trauma in his life. But he said what happened when I made this commitment during my father's suicide that I would never stand by, and if I could do something to help. And he said, my father's suicide was very present in me in those moments when I was landing that plane. And he said, I was so committed to saving those people exactly because I couldn't save my father. So instead of having that trauma bear him down, he transformed it into a power and into purpose. So that's what I was saying. We transform our wounds, our failures, into our commitment.
Wow.
We don't let it go, oh, I failed, I'm so bad, or this was terrible. You take the wound, and that's what actually helps you sometimes to get through. So again, practice, connecting to something bigger than yourself, gathering around you a field of support. Again, that's what Tony said in your inner mentor, build your environment of English, get it around you, but also, take that power to transform, you draw upon your commitments. I'm committed to this because I don't, I would say, I'm like in my mother's case, I'm going to take the worst thing that ever happened and it's going to be the best thing that ever happened. I'm going to use this crisis, I'm going to transform it.
Okay, how the people can follow you or find your books?
Well,
many ways.
I have a website, the first, which is very difficult to remember, robertdilts.com or NLPU.com. They're the same. NLPU stands for NLP University, and we have a school.
Where?
In Santa Cruz, California.
Okay.
Now, I travel a lot, so it's not an all-year school, but it's at the University of California in Santa Cruz, and we do it. It's a summer school. It's residential. People can go there. The programs are usually about 12 to 14 days residential, meaning you live there, and it's where NLP was born. So it's kind of like going to Mecca. It's the birthplace of NLP. So it's a beautiful environment. So that's one place. And then I do travel around the world. For example, here in Paris, I do programs, and those are all on my website under my schedule. And my books are also on the website and on Amazon.
Yes. Great. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.